By the time most people reach their mid-30s, almost everything about them is already set. Their habits, their emotional reactions, even the way they see the world. Think about that for a second. 95% of who you are today is simply repetition of yesterday. The Stoics warned us long ago that we become what we repeatedly do. So if your days look the same, if your thoughts sound the same, and if your emotions feel the same, then your future is already written, unless you decide to change the script. But here's the truth that few ever realize. You are not a prisoner of your past. You can rewire your brain. You can teach yourself to think differently, feel differently, and live differently. And when you do, life doesn't just improve, it transforms. Today, we're going to uncover how you can finally take control of those thoughts and reshape the destiny they create. If you're someone who believes in growth, in freedom, in building a life of purpose rather than being dragged by habit, then this journey is for you. And if you want to keep walking this path of wisdom with me, consider subscribing. As a choice for yourself, a commitment to seek out knowledge, to practice self-mastery, and to live more intentionally each day. Every morning feels like a fresh beginning, yet most of us unknowingly repeat yesterday without even realizing it. The moment you open your eyes, the first instinct is often to reach for the phone. You scroll through familiar faces, the same arguments, the endless stream of headlines, and the constant noise that fills your head before you've even taken a breath. Then, without thinking, you get out of bed on the same side as always, drink the same coffee, drive the same route, and see the same people who trigger the same emotions in you. Day after day, the pattern repeats. It feels comfortable, it feels normal, but the truth is, it's a program running quietly in the background. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If our thoughts remain unchanged, then so does the essence of who we are. Life becomes predictable, not because the world limits us, but because we live as if yesterday dictates tomorrow. What seems like freedom is often an illusion. We say we want change, to be healthier, happier, freer, but our bodies and minds are stubbornly tied to habit. You can think of it as a script you never stop performing. The Stoics taught that true freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want, but from gaining mastery over yourself. When you repeat the same emotions, the same responses, the same beliefs, your choices aren't really choices at all. They're rehearsals. Carl Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Most of us call it destiny, when in reality it's just an unexamined program, one that makes us live the same life in slightly different costumes. The danger isn't only in the routine itself, but in the emotions we attach to it. Every memory carries a feeling, and when you begin your day by recalling problems or disappointments, you instantly drag the past into the present. The mind doesn't let go easily. It clings to what is known, even if what is known hurts you. Seneca once said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Those fears and sorrows from yesterday don't exist anymore, yet the imagination paints them vividly, and the body reacts as if they're still happening now. You feel the weight, you relive the sting, and before long, your state of being is once again colored by memories that should have been left behind. Think about how the cycle works. A single anxious thought sparks a physical reaction, tension in your chest, a knot in your stomach, and that reaction convinces your brain the thought was real. One feeds the other until it's no longer clear which came first. At that point, you aren't simply experiencing stress, you've become stress itself. This is why change feels so unnatural. It isn't just about breaking habits of what you do. It's about breaking habits of what you feel. Stepping outside that pattern is uncomfortable, and that discomfort is precisely why so many avoid it. The body prefers the familiar, even if the familiar is suffering. The moment you decide to respond differently, to withhold blame, to stop repeating guilt, it feels wrong. That inner resistance whispers convincing lies. Start tomorrow. You can't change. This isn't who you are. But that voice is not truth. It is history. Plato observed, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." The battle is not with the world, but with the pull of the familiar. To step into the unknown is to step into life itself, and though the body resists, it is the only way forward. Stress magnifies the cycle. Unlike animals that return to peace once danger passes, we humans can summon fear with thought alone. A deer outruns a predator and returns calmly to grazing. But a human remembers an insult, replays it, and reactivates the entire stress response again and again. The body, built for balance, cannot endure permanent emergency mode. Epictetus reminded us, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Most of us are reacting to what no longer exists, and in doing so, we create new wounds where none should be. Stress becomes not a passing state, but a lifestyle, and eventually a disease. Yet if thoughts can make us sick, thoughts can also make us well. The same imagination that chains us to the past can free us into the future. Your brain does not distinguish sharply between rehearsed action and lived experience. When you imagine clearly, when you feel the emotion of change before it arrives, you plant seeds in the soil of your mind. Over time, those seeds grow into new habits, new beliefs, new ways of being. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." To examine your life is to pull out the weeds of thought that no longer serve you and to make space for growth. Freedom isn't found in chasing novelty outside yourself, but in rewiring what's within. Each time you catch the cycle, the same thought, the same feeling, the same reaction, you're given a chance to choose differently. Small choices made consistently shift the program. Slowly, the unconscious becomes conscious, and what once felt like fate begins to feel like possibility. The Stoics did not promise ease, they promised resilience. And resilience comes from understanding that you are not the sum of your past emotions, but the author of your present ones. So the question remains, will you let yesterday's program run tomorrow's life, or will you take back the script? The answer is not in grand gestures, but in simple awareness, in the courage to pause, to choose, and to step into discomfort. Because on the other side of discomfort lies freedom, and freedom has always been the true purpose of the examined life. We often believe that the choices we make every day are born out of free will. We tell ourselves that we're in control, that when we decide to start a new habit, change a behavior, or even reshape the course of our lives, it's entirely up to us. And on the surface, that feels true. You might wake up one morning with a strong desire for something different, whispering to yourself, "I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. I want to change." But here's where it gets complicated. The conscious mind may want those things, but the body is not easily convinced. The body has been trained by years of repetition, by cycles of emotions and experiences that have etched themselves into its memory. It doesn't listen to what you say you want. It listens to what it has practiced for decades. Think of your body as a stubborn animal that has learned only one path through the forest. You can stand at the edge and point in a new direction, but the animal, out of habit, will return to the same trail it has always walked. That trail is familiar. It feels safe, even if it leads to pain. Stress, guilt, doubt, frustration. These are languages the body speaks fluently. And because the familiar always feels easier than the unknown, the body will tug at you, dragging you back into old patterns, no matter how loudly your mind cries for change. The problem is not that you lack the desire to improve, but that desire alone isn't enough to overcome what has been wired into you. Years of living the same way create emotional grooves so deep that you slip back into them without thinking. You can decide to stop complaining, but the moment discomfort arises, your tongue moves faster than your resolve. You can swear you'll no longer let fear control you, but the instant life feels uncertain, fear rushes back like an old friend you can't quite ignore. This is why so many people feel stuck, torn between the life they want and the life they keep repeating. They mistake willpower for freedom, when in reality, freedom comes from rewiring. The Stoics were clear on this point. Freedom is not about doing whatever we want whenever we want. It's not about chasing comfort or avoiding pain. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom comes when we no longer serve the emotions and habits that enslave us, when our choices are not dictated by fear, by impulse, or by the pull of the familiar. And this mastery does not come from a single decision. It comes from daily practice, from stepping into discomfort again and again until the unfamiliar becomes the new familiar. Consider how often you've promised yourself you'd change tomorrow. The body resists today, so you compromise with the idea of later. I'll start eating better next week. I'll leave this toxic relationship after the next fight. I'll pursue my dream when the timing is right. But the truth is, tomorrow rarely comes. The program speaks with the voice of delay, convincing you that you'll act in the future while ensuring you remain trapped in the present. This illusion of free will explains why so many people wait for a crisis before they truly change. Pain jolts them out of the comfort of routine. Loss, illness, heartbreak, or tragedy shakes the body enough to allow the mind a chance to redirect it. But why wait for disaster? The choice to rewire yourself doesn't have to be forced upon you. It can be chosen in a moment of clarity, in the recognition that if you don't act now, the same patterns will rule the rest of your life. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Wasting life doesn't only mean idleness, it means repeating the same cycle until time has slipped away. What's difficult about this path is that it demands honesty. You must admit that the life you call your own may, in truth, be mostly rehearsed. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it is the starting point of freedom. When you feel the body pulling you back into anger, into self-doubt, into endless distraction, you must pause and see it clearly. You must remind yourself that this pull is not who you are, but simply the program doing what it knows best. Each time you resist the pull, even in the smallest ways, you weaken the illusion that the program is in control. It may be as simple as not picking up the phone the moment you wake up, or choosing to respond with patience instead of irritation when someone pushes your buttons. These moments may seem small, but they accumulate. Slowly, the stubborn animal learns a new path through the forest. Slowly, the body learns to trust the mind again. And when that happens, free will is no longer an illusion, it is a living reality. True change is less about forcing your body to obey and more about teaching it to follow a new rhythm. It is about rewiring thought by thought, emotion by emotion, until what once felt impossible becomes natural. Freedom begins when the conscious mind and the body finally align, when your choices are no longer hijacked by the echoes of the past, but are guided by the clarity of the present. That is the gift of self-mastery, and that is where real free will begins. Every day begins the same way for many people, not with a sense of freedom, but with a quiet return to yesterday. The moment the eyes open, the mind begins scrolling through problems, disappointments, and unfinished conversations. Without even realizing it, the first breath of the morning is colored by the memory of the past. The argument that left you unsettled, the worry about bills, the regret of a mistake, they resurface, not as faint recollections, but as living emotions. And once those emotions return, they shape the way you see everything that follows. What should be a fresh start quickly becomes a continuation of yesterday's burdens. It feels natural because it is practiced, but in truth, it's nothing more than the past replaying itself through you. That is the real trap. The body does not know the difference between what is happening now and what has been remembered with intensity. When you recall a painful moment, the heart races, the muscles tighten, the stomach turns. You are reliving an old experience in the present moment as though it were happening again. And the more often you do this, the more your nervous system learns to respond to memory as though it were reality. Epictetus was right when he said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." So much of the pain that weighs you down is not being caused by life in this very moment, but by the mind's insistence on carrying yesterday into today. It is easy to underestimate the cost of this cycle. Each remembered hurt becomes a lens, and through that lens, you interpret your entire day. If you wake up thinking about betrayal, trust will seem impossible. If you wake up rehearsing failure, opportunity will feel out of reach. The past acts like a filter that colors every present experience with its own shade. And soon, the present is no longer truly present. It is only the past in disguise. Marcus Aurelius once observed, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." If those thoughts are borrowed entirely from memory, happiness remains locked away, held hostage by what has already happened. The deeper danger is that these repeated memories harden into identity. Recall a disappointment long enough, and you no longer see it as something that happened. You see it as who you are. The sadness becomes your nature, the anxiety becomes your normal, the resentment becomes your personality. And because the mind and body grow used to these emotions, they resist any attempt to move beyond them. This is why people find it so difficult to create new futures. If the mind is always staring at the past, then the body is always feeling the past. And together, they recreate the same experiences over and over again. You can say you want change, but if your emotions are anchored to yesterday, you will only end up repeating what you know. It is like walking in circles and calling it progress. The Stoics warned us about this tendency, to be enslaved not by others, but by our own habits of thought. To see how strong this prison is, think of a time when you tried to move forward but felt chained by hesitation. A person may leave a harmful relationship, yet still wake each morning with the weight of its pain. Another may step into a new opportunity but carry with them the voice of doubt formed years before. In both cases, the past is not gone. It is active, it is alive, and it rules the present moment. The bars of this prison are built not of steel, but of memories rehearsed too often. And yet, this cycle is not permanent. Just as thoughts of the past can be replayed, thoughts of the future can be rehearsed. The brain cannot always tell the difference between what is imagined vividly and what is experienced. This is why envisioning a different life, one built on new emotions and new responses, can begin to rewire what feels automatic. The work is not easy because the past feels comfortable even when it hurts. Familiarity tricks us into mistaking suffering for safety, but growth demands discomfort. To step outside the prison of memory requires the courage to sit with unease, to resist the urge to define yourself by old emotions, and to practice new ones until they begin to feel real. Every morning offers this chance. You can awaken and immediately rehearse the same story of who you were, or you can pause, notice the pull of memory, and choose to imagine something else. It might be only a moment of calm, a breath of gratitude, or a vision of the person you want to become. Small acts, repeated, begin to shift the weight of the past and open the door to the future. The prison is strong, but it is not absolute. And once you realize the key has been in your hand all along, you can finally step beyond yesterday and begin to live today as it was meant to be lived, free, open, and unchained. A single thought can feel harmless at first, a flicker of worry passing through the mind, but left unchecked, it plants itself deep, and almost instantly the body begins to respond. The heart rate rises, the muscles tighten, the breath shortens. What began as a mere idea now feels like a real threat. Anxiety is born not from the world outside, but from the picture painted inside. And here lies the trap. The anxiety then confirms the thought that created it. The mind says, "See, you are in danger," because the body is trembling as if it were true. The cycle deepens, thought and emotion feeding each other in a loop so tight that before long you no longer separate one from the other. You don't think stress anymore. You become it. This is why change feels so unnatural. It is not just about resisting a habit of action, skipping the cigarette, avoiding the gossip, breaking the routine. It is about unlearning the emotions that accompany those habits. The body has memorized what it feels like to worry, to grieve, to fear. And when you attempt to step into something new, the body resists not because it is lazy, but because it cannot let go of the emotions it knows best. Consider how quickly the loop can form. A single fearful thought, "I'll fail, they'll reject me, something bad will happen," immediately provokes the body. Then the body's trembling confirms the thought. The mind says, "Yes, it must be true, look at how unsettled I feel." And so the cycle continues. Carl Jung once noted, "What you resist persists." The harder you fight the feelings without understanding their roots, the more they return, strengthened by your own resistance. The loop then solidifies into identity. Anxiety becomes not just a passing state, but who I am. Sadness becomes not a temporary mood, but a permanent trait. And soon, a person is no longer experiencing emotions. They are living as those emotions. This cycle is powerful because it conditions the body to anticipate feelings before the mind has even spoken. Walk into a room where you once felt shame, and the body flushes before the thought forms. Sit down to work on a task that once triggered doubt, and the body grows restless before you've begun. The emotional memory runs ahead of the conscious choice, pulling you back into the loop. Marcus Aurelius warned, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Yet too often we forget this power, surrendering instead to the body's old scripts, rehearsing yesterday's feelings as though they were inevitable truths. The loop also thrives because it rewards itself. Every emotion has chemistry attached to it. The body becomes addicted to the familiar cocktail of stress hormones, and though it harms you, it feels natural. Breaking free means not only resisting the thought, but also enduring the withdrawal from the emotion itself. This is why many return to old habits even when they know better. The body craves what it knows, even if it is suffering. It whispers that discomfort means danger, when in reality discomfort is the doorway to freedom. The imagination, however, is not only a prison, it is also the key. The same mind that can replay fear endlessly can also rehearse courage. The same body that memorized sorrow can be taught to memorize joy. When you close your eyes and vividly picture a future self, calm, strong, unshaken, the brain begins to build the pathways as if it were already true. Slowly, the loop begins to change direction. Instead of fear fueling anxiety, hope fuels action. Instead of doubt confirming weakness, vision confirms strength. The imagination is not the enemy. It is the soil in which both weeds and flowers grow, and it is your attention that decides which will thrive. This process demands patience. Loops that have been practiced for years will not dissolve overnight. But each moment you catch the cycle in motion, you weaken its hold. Notice the fearful thought. Feel the surge of anxiety. And instead of letting the body confirm the lie, breathe and remind yourself that this is memory, not reality. Socrates once said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." You do not break the loop by wrestling with it endlessly. You break it by redirecting your focus, by teaching the body new emotions until the old ones fade from disuse. The emotional loop can feel like a cage, but it is not made of unbreakable steel. It is built of habits, and habits can be changed. With awareness, with practice, with the courage to endure discomfort, you can step outside the cycle and begin to live as someone new. And when that happens, the same imagination that once trapped you becomes the very force that sets you free. Change always sounds inspiring when we think about it, but the moment we try to live it, resistance shows up like a shadow. You decide to take a different path, even in something small, and suddenly the body protests. The heart races, the stomach tightens, the mind fills with doubt. A whisper surfaces almost immediately. "This doesn't feel right. Start tomorrow. You'll never change." Those words feel convincing, but they are not truth. They are echoes of the past. This is why so many people get stuck repeating the same patterns year after year. The body has been conditioned to treat the unfamiliar as unsafe, even when the familiar is misery. Think about it. Staying in a toxic relationship feels easier than leaving. Clinging to unhealthy habits feels more comfortable than building new ones. The mind dreams of change, but the body clings to routine, because the body trusts what it knows, not what it hopes for. Marcus Aurelius once said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." To never step into the unknown is to never truly live, yet resistance persuades us to mistake survival for life. The power of resistance lies in its disguise. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It speaks in rationalizations that feel harmless. "You're too tired today. The timing isn't right. Maybe when you feel more prepared." These excuses don't sound like sabotage, but they quietly delay action, sometimes for years. Seneca once noted, "While we are postponing, life speeds by." Resistance thrives on postponement. It doesn't need to defeat you in one moment. It only needs to convince you to wait again and again until the chance for change slips away. And yet, every moment of resistance carries within it a choice. You can surrender to the familiar, or you can step into the unknown and endure the discomfort that comes with it. Discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort is the proof that you are moving beyond the boundaries of your old self. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The habit of resisting discomfort leads to stagnation, but the habit of facing it, of leaning into it, creates excellence. Each small victory over resistance rewires the body, teaching it to trust what once felt unsafe. But here is the challenge. The body doesn't give up easily. The longer you've lived a certain way, the louder resistance becomes when you try to shift. Old emotions rise to the surface. Guilt, shame, fear, they all rally together to pull you back into the familiar. It feels as though you are betraying yourself, but in truth, you are only betraying the version of yourself that has kept you small. Think of resistance as the threshold guardian. In every myth, the hero encounters a gatekeeper before stepping into a new world. That figure exists to test resolve, to make sure the hero truly wants the transformation ahead. Resistance is your inner gatekeeper. Its job is not to destroy you, but to challenge your determination. If you recognize it for what it is, you stop mistaking it for truth. Instead, you see it as a sign that you are moving in the right direction, that growth is near. The paradox of resistance is that it often grows strongest just before a breakthrough. When you are closest to change, the pull of the familiar feels most intense. The body begs to return to what it knows. The mind invents reasons to stop. But if you can endure this moment, if you can breathe through the panic, quiet the excuses, and take even a single step forward, the hold of resistance weakens. Each time you push past it, the unknown becomes less threatening, and the familiar loses its power over you. Over time, what once felt impossible begins to feel natural. The new becomes familiar, and resistance fades, but it never disappears completely. At each stage of growth it returns, whispering again, testing again. That is not failure, that is life. The work of change is not about eliminating resistance, but about building the strength to move forward even when it appears. In that way, resistance transforms from an enemy into a teacher, reminding you that every step into the unknown is a step into becoming more than you were before. So the next time you hear that whisper telling you to wait, to quit, or to stay where you are, recognize it for what it is, the voice of your past trying to protect itself. You are not that past anymore. You are the possibility of what comes next. And the moment you choose to act despite resistance, you reclaim your freedom and step into the life that was waiting for you all along. Stress was never meant to be a permanent companion. In nature, it exists as a short burst of energy, a survival tool designed to protect life in moments of danger. Picture a deer chased by wolves. Its body surges with adrenaline, every muscle primed to run. When it escapes, the event is over. The deer returns to grazing, its body restored to balance. That is how the stress response was designed: temporary, purposeful, and then released. But human beings complicate this design. Unlike the deer, we don't need predators to trigger stress. A single thought, an old argument replayed in the mind, or even the memory of a failure can activate the same survival response. The body doesn't know the difference between real danger and imagined threat. And so, many of us live in emergency mode not for minutes, but for days, weeks, and even years. This constant state of alert may feel ordinary because it has become familiar, but it is anything but natural. No system can survive in crisis mode forever. When the body is flooded with stress hormones, the immune system weakens, digestion falters, and sleep loses its depth. The very functions that keep us alive and healthy are sacrificed for the illusion of survival. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." The weight of stress doesn't come from the world alone, but from the meaning we give to our thoughts and memories. We choose, often unconsciously, to live as though danger never ends. And when danger never ends, life itself begins to shrink. Instead of enjoying moments of peace, we scan constantly for problems. Instead of resting in the present, we anticipate the next crisis. This is why people wake up already tense, why their shoulders ache by evening, why their nights are restless. They are living in a body convinced it must always be ready to fight or run. The Stoics called us to live in accordance with nature, but there is nothing natural about a body locked in permanent combat with itself. Seneca warned, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary." Stress makes us suffer not only during real hardship, but in anticipation of hardships that may never come. Think of how often stress arises, not from what is happening now, but from rehearsals of what might happen. You remember a conflict at work, and your body relives it. You imagine an argument with a loved one, and your body prepares as if the words were already spoken. Even traffic jams, financial worries, or the smallest inconveniences trigger reactions far out of proportion to the moment. Carl Jung once observed, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." Much of our modern stress is this very thing, suffering created to fill the silence, a reaction to imagined threats, while the real challenges of life go unattended. Over time, stress becomes more than a reaction. It becomes an identity. People describe themselves as anxious, overwhelmed, burnt out, as though these states are permanent labels instead of temporary imbalances. This identification makes escape even harder. When the mind believes it is stress, the body complies. The cycle tightens, and the emergency mode becomes the default. Epictetus reminded us, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." The judgments we place upon our thoughts and experiences determine whether we suffer once or suffer endlessly. And yet, even though stress feels like an enemy, it can serve as a teacher. It shows us where we are most vulnerable, where our expectations clash with reality, where our judgments distort the truth. If we pause to notice stress, to examine the thought that triggered it, we begin to see clearly the gap between reality and our reaction. Aristotle said, "The energy of the mind is the essence of life. If that energy is consumed by stress, then life itself is drained of vitality. But if we redirect that energy from constant fear toward awareness, from judgment toward acceptance, then life begins to restore itself. The path forward lies in choosing not to live as the deer who never stops running." Stress will always visit us, but it doesn't have to own us. Nature intended for balance to follow disruption, for calm to follow chaos. The more we honor that rhythm, the stronger we become. Resistance to this truth weakens us. Alignment with it makes us resilient. The Stoics knew that peace doesn't come from eliminating difficulty, but from meeting it without losing ourselves. Stress may be the silent destroyer when left unexamined, but once understood, it becomes the signal that it is time to return to balance. So when stress next rises, notice it. Recognize that it is not a command but a signal, not a destiny but a choice. You can feed it with more thoughts and more fear, or you can pause, breathe, and allow the body to return to its natural state. The wolves you are running from exist mostly in the mind, and once you see that, you can stop running, step back into the present, and begin living in the freedom that nature always intended. If the past feels heavy, it's because you've been walking through a garden that hasn't been tended in years. Every grudge, every regret, every repeated memory of failure is like a weed that has been allowed to spread unchecked. The longer it stays, the deeper its roots grow, until the garden no longer reflects possibility, but only the shadows of what has already been. To move forward, those roots must be pulled. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with awareness. You see them for what they are, leftovers of a story that no longer serves you. Marcus Aurelius once said, "A man's life is what his thoughts make of it." If your thoughts are weeds, your life becomes overgrown. If they are seeds of strength and vision, your life becomes a field of growth. The process begins not with planting new ideas, but with preparing the soil of the mind. You cannot sow fresh seeds while bitterness and self-pity still choke the ground. Awareness is the spade that breaks the soil open. It means noticing when old patterns return, when the mind clings to blame or replays wounds. It means refusing to water what you no longer wish to grow. This work can feel uncomfortable because the familiar weeds often disguise themselves as identity. I am my anger, I am my failure, I am my guilt. But Carl Jung reminded us, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. The act of uprooting is the act of reclaiming choice, of refusing to let yesterday's identity dictate tomorrow's growth. Once the soil is cleared, planting begins, and what you plant matters. Each thought is a seed. Each vision of yourself is a seed. Each rehearsal of a different reaction, a different way of being, is a seed. The brain does not sharply distinguish between imagination and lived experience. When you vividly picture yourself calm in a storm, patient in conflict, or confident in challenge, your brain begins wiring pathways as if it were already true. The rehearsal becomes practice, and practice becomes nature. Seneca observed, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Rehearsal is preparation. The more you practice being who you wish to be, the more ready you become when life gives you the chance to live it. It is not enough to plant casually. Seeds require care. They require repetition, patience, and nourishment. Just as weeds do not vanish in a single pull, old habits return unless you remain watchful. The garden of the mind thrives on consistency. The beauty of this practice is that it transforms imagination from a source of fear into a source of freedom. Earlier in life, imagination may have replayed failures or magnified fears. Now, it becomes a stage for rehearsing strength, for living tomorrow before it arrives. Epictetus once wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." This is the essence of planting the future, to decide in advance the shape of the person you wish to become, and then to live each day as practice toward that vision. But planting the future requires patience with imperfection. Not every seed grows at once. Not every day feels victorious. Some mornings, the old weeds return, whispering that nothing has changed. This is natural. No garden transforms overnight. The discipline is not in demanding immediate results, but in trusting that repetition will bear fruit. There will be setbacks, days when you feel yourself slipping into anger or doubt, moments when the weeds of the past push through the soil again. But even this is part of the process. Every act of awareness, every time you pull a weed, you strengthen your ability to grow. Over time, you notice the weeds less, because the seeds you planted now bloom stronger. What once felt forced begins to feel natural. What once felt like effort becomes identity. In this way, planting the future is not a one-time act, but a lifelong practice. It is the daily decision to see yourself not as the product of your past, but as the gardener of your becoming. Each thought, each choice, each rehearsal is another seed. And with enough patience and care, the garden of your mind reflects not where you've been, but where you are going. The past may be full of weeds, but the future is always fertile ground waiting for you to plant something new. Freedom is a word that sounds beautiful, but living it is far more demanding than we often admit. Most people imagine freedom as doing whatever they want, whenever they want, but the Stoics understood it differently. They knew that freedom was not the absence of obstacles, but the mastery of oneself in the face of them. It is not about comfort, it is about resilience. To rewire your brain is to accept that discomfort is part of the process, that growth requires stepping outside of the familiar and into the unknown. This mastery begins with something deceptively simple: the refusal to let old emotional reactions rule your present. Think about how many people let a single moment of anger, sadness, or fear shape not just a mood, but an entire day. Then, when repeated, those moods turn into temperaments. Over time, those temperaments harden into traits. The person who once had a passing frustration becomes known as bitter. The person who once felt anxious becomes defined as anxious. This is how identity is formed, not through conscious choice, but through repeated surrender to reactions. Seneca warned, He who is brave is free. Bravery here means not letting the storms of emotion dictate the direction of your life, but instead having the courage to shorten their grip and return quickly to balance. Of course, this work is not easy. The past clings tightly, whispering to you in the form of old habits and familiar pain. Resistance rises the moment you attempt to act differently. But Carl Jung observed, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. To rewire your brain is to endure the discomfort of change, to sit with the unease that comes when you no longer give in to the emotions that once defined you. It is in those very moments of struggle that the brain begins to learn a new way of being. Each time you resist the pull of the past, even for a few seconds longer than before, you carve a path toward freedom. The work of freedom is not grand or dramatic. It is found in the smallest choices, repeated daily. Choosing not to react in anger when provoked. Choosing to breathe before speaking. Choosing to notice the voice of doubt without letting it decide your actions. Over time, these small acts accumulate, rewiring the brain to respond differently. But what does it mean to live forward? It means allowing the mind to guide the body instead of the other way around. It means creating a vision of who you wish to be, rehearsing it in thought, and then aligning your actions with that vision until it becomes your nature. And yet, freedom is never final. It is not a prize you win once and keep forever. It is a practice renewed daily. Just as weeds return to any garden left untended, old habits and emotions will try to creep back into the mind. The work of freedom is the work of vigilance, noticing when you are slipping back into old loops and choosing again to return to the present. Over time, these choices reshape the very architecture of your brain until freedom feels less like effort and more like nature. So freedom, in the Stoic sense, is not comfort. It is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to carry yourself through struggle without being broken by it. It is the resilience to feel pain without becoming it, to face uncertainty without collapsing into fear, to remember the past without being chained to it. True freedom begins when the mind no longer drags the soul backward, but teaches the body how to live forward. And once you taste even a small measure of that freedom, you realize it was never about escaping life, but about finally living it as it was meant to be lived, with strength, clarity, and the courage to be fully awake. Freedom is not waiting somewhere in the distance. It begins the moment you choose to no longer be ruled by the past. Every thought you guide, every emotion you shorten, every habit you reshape is proof that you are stronger than the program that once held you. The Stoics reminded us that the true measure of a life is not comfort, but resilience. Carry that with you, and you'll discover that the future is not something to fear. It is something you are planting right now. If this message spoke to you, stay with us and watch one of the suggested videos on your screen to continue this journey of self-mastery and growth. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. Your path to freedom is only just beginning.